Officials in Ukraine are accusing Russia of grossly violating international obligations. That comes after the Russian Defense Ministry said all ships sailing into ports in the Black Sea would be considered military ships. The Ukraine Foreign Ministry went on to accuse Russia of trying to increase world food prices through its withdrawal from the Black Sea Grain Initiative. What will be the impact then on the global food supply? I want to get our guest for that. Joining us now is Matthew Hollingworth, the WFP Ukraine representative. Matthew, really appreciate you being with us this evening on the show. I'm sure you've seen the reporting, you would have heard it as well from your teams on the ground, that the last 3 nights that we have been showing here, our viewers, Russia really pummeling the south, Odessa, Mykolaiv, and targeting specifically, says President Zelensky, the country's port infrastructure. What impact is this having on grain storage and any possible shipments here?
I mean, clearly, since the decision by the Russian Federation earlier this week to pull out of the Black Sea Initiative, we have been looking very carefully at the impact of our operations globally and our operations here in Ukraine. There's 3 key problems with Russia pulling out, terminating their involvement in the Black Sea Initiative. The first of all, of course, is that we relied on the Black Sea Initiative to move 725,000 tons of food to people living in places like Afghanistan and Yemen, Ethiopia, Somalia, Sudan, and so on, countries that desperately need that food assistance. And this was a country where we could guarantee on high quality, competitive market price food. And it was the largest single sourcing nation last year for the World Food Programme, despite the conflict, despite the invasion. So that's going to leave a massive hole in our operations of trying to get food to people around the world that desperately need it. There's 345 million people living in severe food insecurity right now. So that shouldn't be underestimated. The second thing, obviously, is the impact globally, on the food prices and availability. We've seen an 8% rise on both sides of the Atlantic in the last 24 hours on the price of wheat. That's going to hit a lot of poorer people around the world in their pocket. It will mean global food insecurity if those prices stick, and if they stick at that level. But obviously what worries me is, as the representative here inside Ukraine, is the devastating impact on the farming economy of this country. It's 15%. Farmers are 15% of the employment workforce of this country. If they don't farm, if there's no incentive to farm because they can't get their produce to market, then it's going to have a long-lasting impact on this nation as well as the rest of the world. And that's just part of the food systems. Truck drivers won't be having any work. Stevedores in the ports. All of the other food systems activities that support an agricultural economy as important as this, all suffering because of this decision.
They're all so interconnected. Let me focus on your first point, the hole it was going to leave in your operations. What are the options then, Matthew, and then to try to get the grain moving again? Do you believe, given everything we have seen in the last few days, that Russia will return to the agreement, or are you looking at option B, option C here?
We are a humanitarian organization. We're used to working in the most complex, chaotic environments. We've always got a plan B and a plan C. Yeah. What we hope, though, is that we can see the world come together to get the Russian Federation back to the negotiating table. I think Secretary General made it very clear in his speech earlier this week that many of the issues that the Russian Federation raised have actually been part or almost met. So we want them to come back to the table because it's not just about Ukraine, it's about global food security. And none of us, in a time when we see, weather extremes, climate extremes around the world, and we are still at a 10-year high in terms of food costs around the world, we can't afford to lose as important a sourcing country, a food producer as this from the global market.
Do you know, Matthew, whether the UN is already talking, is in conversation with President Putin, with Russia, to try and bring him back on board? Do you know if these conversations are happening behind the scenes?
Absolutely certain the United Nations is not going to give up on this issue and will continue everything it can to try and find a result to ensure the safety of vessels in the northwestern part of the Black Sea, to ensure that food can continue to leave this country. If we will certainly have other options in terms of solidarity lanes, in terms of other routes out of the country, but none of them are going to replace what we've currently lost. But it's only a few days. The market still is jittery. We need to see how the rest of the world actually recovers in terms of the market, whether it can stabilize, and we need to have a little bit of time yet to get these actors back together and negotiating and coming to an agreement.
Speaking of actors and negotiating here, I was speaking, Matthew, to one of the negotiators behind the grain deal, and this is what he told me yesterday. Have a listen to this.
They will probably find it hard to walk back. So they will probably only agree to humanitarian shipments. I think the World Food Programme could step in. I think if Russia would agree to that, so that at least, you know, the world's most needy people in the world's, you know, most food short countries would get supplies from Ukraine, which is such a big contributor to the grain market.
And Matthew, I mean, David Harlan was pretty pessimistic when I spoke to him yesterday about Russia coming back on board. What do you make then of this idea that Russia may only agree to humanitarian shipments and the WFP would probably have to step in? Is that part of the other considerations that you are looking at, you think are being talked about here?
Look, I mean, from our perspective, of the 33 million tons of food that managed to get out of Ukraine since last July through the Black Sea Initiative, 20% of it went to the Global South, and that was trading. That was through normal economic agreements between those nations and this nation. The humanitarian assistance that went out is very, very important, but we can't underestimate the importance of global availability, global accessibility because of Ukraine. So I think we need to push harder than simply only having a humanitarian delivery system through some sort of partial agreement. We need more than that if we're going to actually achieve and continue to achieve some form of stability when the world already is seeing just enormous levels of food insecurity.
Matthew Hollingworth, really appreciate you taking time to speak to us this evening, Matthew. Thank you very much.